Hi, Brandon. Nice to meet you.
Great to meet you. Thanks for having me.
So my name is Joanie Margulies. I am a correspondent at the Jerusalem Post, former breaking news desk manager. I'm here with Brandon Farbstein. We are so excited to hear all about your story and everything that you've accomplished in your short time on Earth because you're quite young, aren't you?
At
You're
25.
like, wow, okay, so you've accomplished more by 25 than I have. um, I'm really excited to hear about your trip to Israel so far, everything that you've accomplished just in general, and also hear about this interesting new appointment that you received from President Herzog.
Yeah,
So, can you start out by telling me about that?
for sure. So I was just appointed to President Herzog's new initiative called Voice of the People, where it's bringing together 150 Jews from around the world and around the diaspora. We're all doing incredibly unique things in our own very unique way. So there are influencers, there are media personalities, business executives, philanthropists, like every type of person that you can imagine. And we're basically trying to come together to solve the most pressing challenges facing global Jewry, which is quite a big feat to try and figure out. But what I think that I'm most excited about is the fact that we're getting to use our collective individual experiences to say, this is what I know to be true. And we may not have all of the answers. In fact, we're not going to have all the answers. But if we could do something to move the needle just a little bit forward and to ensure that there's a little bit more light at the end of the tunnel, I think that's a success.
So, can you tell me what some of those processes look like to move that needle?
That's a great question because we're just getting started. This 5 day conference that we just spent together in Haifa was the very first time that we were all together, and it was the official launch of the council. So we're quite frankly, we have a blank slate ahead of us, which is very exciting. It's, again, a big task to try and tackle, but we're basically figuring out 5 different topics that we've been assigned to. There's polarization, anti Semitism, Jewish and non Jewish relations, Israel and the diaspora, and then identity and heritage. And so we've each been assigned one of those topics in a small group of 15 people. And so that's basically like our mishpacha for the next 2 years. We're needing to figure out within that set of issues, which for me is Jewish and non Jewish relations, where can we find solutions? But of course, first we need to figure out what the problems are. And so that's in the current phase that we're in, identifying exactly what we need to tackle, what we need to solve, and going from there.
So it's interesting that you are talking about this Jewish and non-Jewish relations, knowing that you're coming from originally that you're from Richmond, Virginia. Um, what was the Jewish population like there when you were growing up?
I want to say maybe like 12,000, somewhere between like 10 to 15,000. So nowhere near a sizable community, but also not super tiny. So there definitely was multiple synagogues of different denominations, different types of community groups, youth groups, that sort of thing. But I never really felt a sense of belonging in the Jewish community. And so now to be in a place like LA where it's almost overwhelmingly
Yeah.
Jewish in a very good way, so
Mm.
many choices of different events and different groups to join. And I love it because there's just really somebody for everyone and there's something for everyone too.
That's amazing. So, what are some of the ideas that you have so far for this new project?
Something that I'm incredibly passionate about based on honestly my own lived experiences is being a bridge builder. I think now more than ever, we have to really focus on crossing divides instead of trying to only be on our side, only continue surrounding ourselves with people that think the way that we do, look the way that we do, etc. And yeah, to a certain extent, that's what we're naturally going to do. But I think the real challenge, the real impact as well is when we are able to have conversations and dialogue with somebody that we don't agree with. And it doesn't mean that we have to get on the same page or see things in the same way, but simply having the ability to talk and not tear each other's heads off is a skill. And it's something that unfortunately has been lost. And what I'm really trying to do is show people it starts with you. And all you have to do sometimes is say hi, be willing to get uncomfortable, to have a conversation where you might be challenged. You might be thinking things that you haven't thought before or expanding your own perspective. That's okay. I think we need to be willing to do more of that. And so that's what I'm really trying to bring to our council.
Do you have any examples of this bridge building from even before this project launched?
I'm currently a part of a really amazing initiative founded by Daniel Lubitsky called Builders Movement. It was formerly called Starts With Us, and it's bringing together over 300 leaders from across sectors, across many different industries, basically doing just that, where we're all coming from incredibly unique points of views and lived experiences and all of that, but we're basically saying, how can we come together and basically have compassion, have the ability to stand with empathy and lead with that as well in a time when there's so much polarization, there's so much just toxic being on one side or the other. We have to focus more on unity as much as possible. And I'm not trying to say that it's easy. It's really freaking hard. But again, that's the challenge. And to be a Jew right now presents an even bigger challenge, but an even bigger opportunity. And that's what I see.
I absolutely love that perspective. That's very refreshing, especially in this day and age. So I want to take a step back and just get into how you got into your motivational speaking and your whole career. How did it start?
So, what you probably can't tell on camera right now, I was born with a rare form of dwarfism. So rare, in fact, that there are only about 85 cases ever of my condition reported. So, not just people that are alive right now, but like ever recorded in medical history.
Oh,
And
wow.
so it comes with the life of uncertainty, not knowing what the next stage, the next 5 years, 10 years, any of that will look like. And I spent the first, I would say, majority of my life really hating being different and wanting to disappear. And it wasn't until I reached a point of honestly wanting to do just that and needing to realize that I couldn't handle life alone. And that's when I started therapy and recognizing I can't choose what happens to me. Can't change if people are going to stare at me or if they're going to point or anything like that because of the way that I look. But I could always choose how I respond and the voice inside my head. And as a young teen, that really started to change the way that I just went about life and I handled adversity. And then I was presented with a very unique opportunity to share my story for the first time, which ended up being a TEDx talk. And that was when I was 15, freshman in high school. And that literally was the first talk that I ever gave. It was in that moment that I found this sense of purpose and passion. And it was only a 6 minute talk, but that kind of laid the foundation for everything that was to come. And I soon started my motivational speaking career after that, just organically getting invites from schools and conferences and companies to share my story and present to their audience. And by the time that I knew it, I was able to basically have a professional career by the time I graduated high school. And just the timeline of everything really is interesting. I was very severely cyberbullied in high school, and it got to a point where I had to leave my physical school because I felt so unsafe. The administration did nothing, the police did nothing, and I realized I had to get myself out of that environment. And with all the extra time that I had, because I went from being in like advanced honors level classes in school to then online at the time, for whatever reason, they only offered like the lowest bare bones requirement in order for me to graduate. And so I kind of felt like, not that I'm this genius by any means, but I felt like I knew a lot of the information.
Mm-hmm.
So I breezed through the schoolwork. And with all the extra time that I had, that's literally when I made the realization, why do I need to wait to graduate high school or graduate college? I should start my career. And that's exactly what I did.
Well, kol hakavod. That's
Thank you.
very impressive. When I was 15, what was I doing? Not that. So I'm really curious to hear how your Jewish heritage has supported this or impacted the launch of your business.
It's really interesting because a couple of years ago, I would say up until a couple of years ago, I had no sense of connection to my Jewish identity, to really this sense of pride that comes with being a Jew. And it wasn't until I came to Israel for the first time on Birthright that I had this spark that just reignited within me that I think I had maybe when I was younger, because I remember around my bar mitzvah age and like a young teenager, I was really excited about being a Jew. I was involved in different things and just I had a sense of pride. But then, especially being a young adult, I kind of lost that. And it it really was the 10 days of being in Israel where not even from a like cultural standpoint was I so taken aback, but I think that was the first time that I fully understood our people's history, the resilience that comes with the thousands and thousands of years where we've tried to be eliminated.
Mm-hmm.
And that really resonated with me. And from that point, which was actually 3 months before 10/7, I honestly, that was the foundation for me to have this sense of pride and huge Jewish identity that I've really leaned into the last 2 years, and I've not looked back.
I will take this opportunity to say Megalia. Um, so I'm curious what some of the parallels are between your experiences as a person with. Can you tell me, is it right to say a condition? Is it right? What's the proper
It's a
terminology?
great question, and I appreciate you asking it. I always use disability.
Okay.
I've learned, though, that each person has maybe a slightly different preference. So, what's right for me may not be right for somebody else, but I always think instead of trying to lead with like the politically correct term, you should always just ask for the person's name.
I was going to say, I saw a video of you speaking where you were like talking about someone asking, what's the proper term to use for you? And you're like, you can call me Brandon.
Yeah,
Again, a person is a person, and regardless of how they look and what they are presenting,
yeah,
they're still a person.
100%.
So, yeah, some of your experiences as a person with a disability and the Jewish community's history of just facing not diversity, adversity overall.
Yeah.
I know that's a kind of loaded question, but I would love to hear your perspective on that.
For me, what I've realized is, quite frankly, I'm living in a world not built for somebody like myself. Not just from the physical standpoint, in terms of I'm under 4 feet tall, so when I go to a restaurant, when I go to a bar, it's a bit difficult for me to sit in a normal chair, and
Mm-hmm.
I have to adapt and things like that. Um, but quite frankly, it's more so societally, where I'm looked at most of the time as not a human being simply because I'm small and I'm short statured. But what I've realized is because so much of the representation historically in TV shows and movies for people that have dwarfism have been things that aren't human. Things like being an elf or being an Oompa Loompa or
Yeah.
whatever. And that I feel like is my biggest thing that every single day I'm fighting against. I have to prove not even my worth, I have to prove that I'm just as much of a human being as you are. And that is a huge challenge because honestly, no matter where in the world I am, I face that. And I know I'm going to continue facing it. And so the thing for me that has been honestly huge has been getting as content as I can with myself, if that's a term that makes sense. In terms of like, I had to really from the lowest depths of pain and despair, I had to realize that my self-worth is not defined by anyone else other than me. And it really is making the voice inside of my head louder than anybody else's. And that's, again, incredibly hard to do. And it takes time, it takes practice. And at 25, every single day I'm still learning it. But at the same time, I think this perspective, the adversity, the journey that I've been through, has really enabled me to have this sense of hope. The sense that no matter what you go through, what happens to you, it doesn't equal who you are. It's a part of who you are, but it's up to you to set the definition. And again, sometimes it takes like really being beaten down to realize who you are, what you've got, and that inner sense of strength and resilience. I really think it doesn't just spark from the adversity that I've been through. I 100% know that it is built into me, it is built into my bones because I'm a Jew.
I love to hear that. We will keep on surviving because we have to.
Yes.
So, just are there any Jewish teachings that you think have helped you in your career or just overcoming said adversity?
The idea of Tikkun Olam has been kind of a guiding light for me. It's this idea that no matter who you are or how you were born, you have the ability to make the world just a little bit better, to repair the world. And I think that's something that is honestly like a call to action, not only for me, but for all of us. That we have to remember yes, we are one person in a sea of so many voices, so much noise, but we have the ability to make a difference. We have the ability to impact lives on a daily basis. We don't have to do anything other than showing up as ourselves sometimes, because that shows somebody else that you could be yourself too. It's an incredibly powerful act. And so I think now more than ever, knowing that, again, even in the smallest way, you could bring light to the darkness. Tikkun Olam is exactly that.
That's beautiful. So, on another note, going back to living in LA, what was it like adjusting to the Jewish community there? Also, just irrelevant, I can introduce you to a lot of people in the community out
Yeah,
there. We can definitely talk after.
please. And also, that's one of the things that I love, not just about LA, but especially being here in Israel, this sense of Jewish geography, how we are literally all like 1 degree away from each other. It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's so much fun. Um, for me, I, again, growing up in Richmond, Virginia, where there isn't a huge sense of a Jewish community, it is so refreshing to be in a place like LA where it's normal to be Jewish. It's not like the exception or whatever. And I, I find that very, very energizing in a lot of ways because, again, I didn't have that as a kid. And so now every week, if I want to, probably every single day as well, I could go to a different event, to a different dinner or whatever it might be. And it's been really amazing.
Yeah, Los Angeles young professionals, they like really have managed to get their act together and they have been incredibly vocal in just like standing up for Jews and Israel worldwide. So before October 7th, you book a speaking engagement that obviously looks different, or not obviously, I would think that it looks different than it does in a post October 7th world. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
It does and it doesn't. And what's really interesting about, I think, my line of work, most of my audiences, even still to this day, are not Jewish. So whether it's companies, conferences, schools, um, I have the ability to not necessarily resonate with anyone, but I think I also have a message that is impactful to so many different groups of people. And so I post 10/7 because I am choosing to speak up and show up in the way that I am. not necessarily just about Israel, but about our hostages, about being Jewish in general, about anti Semitism that is facing every Jew around the world essentially right now. Unfortunately, it's been deemed as political and controversial. And so while I've never been directly told, we're not booking you because you're speaking about Israel, I 1000% know, based on who these events have chosen instead of me, when I know it's either me or another speaker, seeing the other speaker that is not involved in any activism, any sort of, again, role that could be deemed as controversial. And I find that very sad. But at the same time, it's something where I'm very much willing to lose business. I'm willing to lose followers, which I have lost thousands in the 18 months now that I've been speaking up in the way that I have. Because if those people, for whatever reason, are upset about what I have to say, I don't want them following me anymore.
Not everyone understands quality.
Absolutely.
So
And
that makes a lot of sense.
it's tough too because I'm not trying to convince anybody. I'm not here to show uh, the news. I'm not here to present anything other than my viewpoint, how I see the world, and what my beliefs are. And again, if somebody doesn't want to accept that, listen to that, hear it, then that's fine. I'm not going to waste my energy on you.
Right on. I love that attitude because not everyone is worth your breath, unfortunately.
Sorry.
So I'm curious at what point you realized, and I feel like you have already touched on this, but at what point did you realize that your experiences could help others?
I think the first time that I realized I had the ability to help others was probably the first time I shared my story, which was that TEDx talk. And it was afterwards that I had people coming up to me that were nothing like me in terms of I was 15 at the time. They were in suits and 30, 40, 50 years older than me, coming up with tears in their eyes saying, "Thank you for sharing your story. You unlocked something within me." Or, "I was bullied as a kid. I've always wanted to speak up." Something like that. And it started to click that maybe people don't need to be in your exact shoes to know what it's like to be in a similar experience, whether
Mm-hmm.
that's feeling alone, feeling not good enough, invisible, etc. We're all susceptible to that. And I think we all go through that at different points, at different levels, that sort of thing. But just being able to be vulnerable about it is huge. And the more that I started doing it, and whether that was on a stage, on social media, I realized there's so much power in showing up with authenticity. And I honestly got hooked just based on the fact that I saw people were impacted so much by how I'm choosing to live my life, not necessarily at the fact that I'm disabled or that I have this condition or whatever, but I could tell it's more so how I'm making a choice every single day. And other people appreciate the fact that you don't necessarily need to be disabled in order to do the same.
Right on. So I am aware that you were very involved with passing, or you were crucial in passing some important anti-bullying legislation in your home state of Virginia.
Yeah,
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
for sure. So this was after I started a really terrible journey, as I alluded to before, of cyberbullying. The very first week of my ninth grade year of high school, it started with a tweet that was a picture of me on my Segway mobility device. And it said, "First person to punt the midget off the Segway gets $5." And it would be one thing if it was like some random account that had no followers, no engagement, no whatever. It was somebody's public Twitter account. They had hundreds of people that liked and retweeted that post. And so that was maybe the second or third day of high school for me. And that was like the very tip of the iceberg because I started receiving the most graphic, vile, anti-Semitic rhetoric that was sent to me via Instagram posts that took my pictures and even clips of my TED talk and distorted them, putting them next to Hitler, saying this disgusting thing should have been gassed in the Holocaust. Nobody's ever going to love him. He should just go off himself. Like the most disgusting things that one person could say to another. And I realized that the school was doing nothing. The police said that there was nothing that they could do because, of course, there was always a loophole that they found. The threat wasn't specific enough. We can't identify the IP of where it's coming from, et cetera, et cetera. There was always a reason why it couldn't be investigated. And my parents and I realized we had to speak up, we had to say something. And with the help of a close family friend that was a lawmaker in Virginia, we testified in front of a few different committees in the state legislation house, the House of Delegates, and we were able to get 2 laws passed. One on bullying prevention that requires administrators to alert parents of both the victim and the perpetrator when any bullying incident happens. One of those things like, why does this need to be a law? But as we very quickly found, unless it is a law, they're not mandated to do anything. But then where I'm exceptionally proud of what we did is requiring empathy and social emotional learning, specifically like emotional boundaries that are age specific to be taught starting in kindergarten, ending when they leave high school. So one of those things, you can't expect it to end bullying. You can't expect hate to be eradicated. But I know from my experience that if you equip somebody with empathy, with the power that their words have meaning, and they could either use that for good to uplift somebody, or they could use it to tear somebody down. Young people especially need to know that. And I think it would have been the difference of me experiencing what I did versus them stopping themselves before they even press send.
Yeah. And also, emotional intelligence is something that not everyone is born with,
Yeah.
and people need to learn it. And exactly, even if you think that's something that's supposed to be learned at home, we know very well you cannot depend on someone's home life to teach them everything that they need to know. That's not any shade on anyone's home life.
No,
That's just
100%.
reality.
Everybody has different circumstances.
So just before I ask you about your anti-Semitic experiences when you were in school, I want to add a quick anecdote. I'm from Long Island.
Oh, my mom is from there.
Oh, where?
Jericho.
Okay, so she's from like a Jewish part of Long Island. I'm still like half an hour east of
Okay.
that, in a very small, insulated, very waspy community. Beautiful place to grow up, but when you're one of the only Jews, not so much.
Right.
And I had a teacher tell me that, or she was like trying to fail me in a class that I shouldn't have been failing in. And this teacher told me that Hitler should have finished the job. And so when I reported it and went to the guidance counselor in a meeting with my mom, they both, not my mom, but the teacher and the guidance counselor just sat there and they're like, that didn't happen. And that's on Long Island. So I can only imagine what it was like experiencing that as a kid in Virginia.
Yeah.
That's also part of why I wanted to know the context of the Jewish community in Richmond.
Totally.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I feel like, honestly, most of the attacks that I received, especially in high school or on social media, were not because of my Judaism, and we're not anti-Semitic primarily. Maybe like 20% of the incidents had something to do with anti-Semitic rhetoric or
That is
language
still
like
something,
that.
though.
Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely,
yeah.
100%. And that being said, it gave me the ability when later in my life, especially as I've gotten more followers, more attention, etc., when the incidents have gotten really bad, I don't think I'm swayed by those anymore. Simply because I know what it's like to receive really graphic, disgusting things. And I mean, most of the time, realizing that it's not even a person sending it, it's a bot, but also still taking security, still taking my own safety more carefully than I've ever taken it, and not living in fear, but also living in a real world, being aware.
Right on. I say
I
that
don't
a
think
lot,
that
but
answered your question.
no, it's okay. I also just say right on all the time because that's a easier response. So you wrote multiple books, 10 Feet Tall, and the second one is a kid's book about self-love. Is
Yeah.
that the title?
Hmm.
Can you tell me your experiences writing those and just, what they're about? Because unfortunately, I have not read them yet.
Oh, good. So my first book, 10 Feet Tall, I wrote when I was 18. And what I wanted to do with that book was share my story in a way where I'm basically saying, this is not my autobiography. This is what I've been through so far and what I've learned. And here's what maybe you could pick up on as well. Here are the tools that are universal. Things like mindset, mentality, like literally living a 10 feet tall life, realizing it doesn't matter what you look like. It's about how in your mind you are treating yourself, you're uplifting yourself, that sort of thing, like literally being 10 feet tall.
Yeah.
And so that I self published. And I, again, just wanted to get it out there when I was 18. But then my most recent book, kids' book about self love, I released during the pandemic when I had this realization because my speaking engagements were basically all put on pause. There were no live events happening at the time. I wanted to write something for the version of me that needed me when I was in my most vulnerable place. And that was when I was a young kid and I didn't have any sort of self love, or I didn't know what the term self acceptance was. And now to provide that sense of uh, really like a platform for kids, no matter who they are, to see that they have awesomeness that exists within them. It's really special.
So I'm aware that you're also involved with many advisory roles in diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I'm curious what some of the common challenges that organizations have faced regarding this and how you're able to guide them towards more meaningful inclusion, specifically or especially regarding disability inclusion.
Yeah, it's really interesting because right now diversity and inclusion are unfortunately being weaponized. And I'm in a very interesting place because I'm obviously very involved in Jewish advocacy, Jewish causes, where DEI historically has not included us. And yet, I'm also, of course, living as a disabled person, and DEI is what accessibility, like, that's the umbrella for what accessibility is under. And so, without DEI, there is no accessibility. And so, I'm in a very interesting place where I'm trying to continue making it known that we have to not eliminate this. We can't say, everything about diversity, everything about inclusion needs to go. Some things absolutely we need to change and we need to shift our approach. But to say that we are going to eliminate entire departments, entire programs is heartbreaking and it's devastating. And now more than ever, we can't go back on the progress that we've made, especially when we look at the disability community, which is the largest minority group in the world, comprising over 15% of the population, which most people, that blows their mind. But it is what essentially touches us all, whether we right now have somebody that we directly know or love that has a disability, or later in life. It's inevitable, whether that happens to us when we get older and have less mobility, get into an accident, like many different things that could happen. We are 1 second away at any time from joining the disability community. And yet, for the most part, until somebody decides to bring it up and address it, it's forgotten about. Very similar to Judaism. And this is why representation matters so much. And I am very committed using my platform, using my sense of visibility to showing not only anyone that feels different, but really anyone and everyone that we were here to be exactly who we are and not hide, not cover up, not be a version that isn't us. But that's how we impact the world the most, by showing up with every bit of who we are.
Yeah, we were all created in God's image. Whether someone believes that or not, that's personally what I
Yeah.
believe.
Yeah.
So, what do you think that are some steps some people can take, um, individuals and organizations, to help elevate empathy and foster inclusive environments?
Really, it starts with how we are behaving in our own sphere. And I think this is where we all have to have this like leader mentality. We don't necessarily need to manage people in order to know what it's like to bring others in or to make the table a little bit bigger. Like bring a chair when there isn't somebody that is included in the conversation but needs to be. That's kind of where it's the onus is on us a little bit to realize we sometimes have an obligation to say who isn't involved already, who needs to be a part of this. And again, whatever our role is, whether we're a teenage leader, or somebody that manages hundreds of people at a huge company, or we're somebody that just wants to better the world, simply realizing the role that you play in all of this is just widely important. And I think it's something that really does start with us, whether we're talking about social media, how we're behaving, the things that we're posting, or it's even who we're associating with. If those that we are constantly hanging out with are toxic and being negative and complaining all the time, it's going to be really hard to feel a sense of like positivity or joy or motivation. But if we're instead hanging around people that uplift us in some way or just encourage us to be a better human being, I think that is honestly the secret to experiencing happiness in a way where it's sustainable. And it's not just like these little moments that come and go, but things are always going to happen that don't go our way. That's the waves, like that's life. The waves of something good, something bad, something good, something bad. And recognizing the next wave is on the way is really important.
So, what are some of the efforts that overall any community in the world, or any person, place, thing, even the smallest efforts that they could make to make the world more accessible for people like you? Not just people like you, but anyone dealing with some kind of
Yeah.
difference.
I think really it's sometimes getting out of your head, where I'll give you a very tangible example. I live alone, and so I go to the grocery store by myself. I go most places by myself, unless, of course, I'm with a friend or whatever. And sometimes I do need help if there's something on a high shelf or whatever. Um, and the best thing that someone can do sometimes is literally just say, "Do you need any help? Can I? Is there anything that I could do to help you?" Um, Instead of trying to like make it all complicated, do I say hi to this person? What term do I use? Do I approach them to begin with? That sort of thing. Um, we often get so caught up with, are we going to offend? Are we going to come across the wrong way, that we don't show up in the first place? But just making the effort, making the intention, I think is everything. Um, so that's number one. But number two, it is recognizing that there is really a lot of beauty in diversity. And that's what humanity is. It is diversity. Every one of us thinks differently, looks differently, maybe in more ways than some, but recognizing like again, that's what it means to be a human being, and we have to embrace that.
That's beautiful. And I'm just curious what some of your, like, how do you hope that your business will evolve moving forward?
I really hope that I'm able to impact people in a way that's even bigger and honestly in a way that's I'm not envisioning yet, because I want to show people what is possible no matter who they are, how they were born, and whether that's hosting a TV show, whether that's doing a documentary. I don't know. I want to really have a larger sense of representation for anyone that has felt othered.
God bless. Thank you so much. I really
Thank
appreciate
you.
you taking the time to come meet with us.
Truly honored.
All right. Thank you.